Starter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined today by Ed Hernandez, member of the California State Senate. He is chair of the Senate Health Committee, and he has proposed legislation that has caused a lot of people to raise their eyebrows. It was 21 days of tweets to try to raise the smoking age to 21.
That is correct.
Sir, talk to me.
Well, think about it this way. If we raise the age of smoking from 18 to 21, you're going to now reduce the number of young adults that are going to get addicted to nicotine, eventually become lifetime smokers, ultimately save their lives because nicotine leads to death, and it's going to save billions of dollars in healthcare costs in the long run in the state of California without costing the taxpayers a single penny.
There's so many different directions we can take on this. If you consider that for one to use alcohol, one needs to be 21 years old. But that was a change. I remember when that happened. It was right around the time I was turning 18 when all the drinking ages went up to 21. The flip side, though, is if you can fight and die for this country, why shouldn't you be able to smoke and drink in this country?
Well, we can have that same argument you were saying about drinking. I mean, people have said, well, if you're in the military, why don't you lower the drinking age? Well, we're not going to do that.
Right.
But think about the addictive nature of tobacco and what it leads to. It leads to death. So what I'm looking for is what is the overall health aspects of what's going to happen in the state of California.
So talk to me about the noise surrounding this bill. I don't mean that pejoratively, but you know, there was a lot of it.
Right.
I saw those tweets, and I remember, and you proposed the bill a couple months ago, but it's still making noise.
Yeah, I mean, everything you talked about, you know, well, we allow people to go to war and die,
Right.
you know, you can vote at 18, why are you taking away rights? But, you know, when you look at the toll and the cost for health care and the addictiveness of the nicotine and what it does to individuals, but here's the other thing, too, and why I think it's so important to raise it up to age 21. There are studies that show that if an individual that's younger and the brain has a higher chance of becoming addictive once you start smoking younger and become lifelong. And I think it's a higher percentage of those that start before they're 21 are more likely to become lifetime smokers.
What about the notion that they'll get cigarettes somehow, some way? You create a black market.
Well, I mean, that's the case because there are individuals who are 16 or 17 that are being bought cigarettes by their friends.
So it's happening anyway.
It's happening anyway. But right now, the way it's written, and right now, it's if they do that, they're not going to be thrown in jail for buying or for having or smoking if they're underage. They just can't purchase them. So it's just going to change the age. But here's the other thing.
So what does your bill do? Does it change the age to smoke or change the age to acquire and purchase?
It changes the age to acquire and purchase. Okay, so it doesn't change because right now, if somebody is 16 and a friend of theirs who is 18 buys them cigarettes, you know, they're not going to get arrested for it. They can't legally buy the cigarette.
Can they smoke the cigarette, the 16-year-old?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want my 16-year-old to smoke.
But legally?
I don't know if there's any
I
statutory
don't
anything
either,
that
right.
says that if you're 16, you're going to get thrown in jail and
Right.
you're going to get fined.
Right,
But it's just the sale of it, you know. So here's the other thing too. Why I think it's important to change to 21. You know, there is a new recent Department of Health that put out a study that showed that they looked at 19, 21, and 25, and they found that 21 was the most efficient age. And if you are, say, 16, you're more likely to have a friend that's 18 or 19.
Right.
Whereas if you're 16, you're less likely to have a friend that's 21. So it's out of your social sphere, so it's harder to get cigarettes.
You may not like to hear this, but I think it's fair to say that we will probably see a ballot initiative in November of 2016 that will be looking to legalize marijuana.
Right.
And as I understand it, in places where marijuana has been legalized, the age set has been 18. How does this bill play into that?
Well, this would classify tobacco products. Now, if marijuana, through the initiative process, were classified as a tobacco product, then it would say 21.
Okay.
However, if the people and the voters of the state of California, there could be a conflict, and if they say you can purchase marijuana at 18, I'm assuming that they could.
Right. So what's your sense, though, of marijuana? How does this play in the background of tobacco? Because as I understand it, marijuana does not have the same addictive properties. I don't believe marijuana has nicotine. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are plenty of negative consequences. But am I accurate? I know that you're an optometrist, so you have some medical background or some whatever it may be. But what can you tell us?
Well, I mean, yes, there are two different issues. But here's the thing: if you look at where the states have done, the highest priority for them is get marijuana out of the hands of children.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised that to make it more successful here in California, they may even consider 21 because we haven't seen any of that language at all.
That's true.
So there's a possibility that they may even set it at 21.
So talk to us about what's happening with your bill. Obviously, it needs to go through certain committees. You know, I could envision a scenario where it gets killed right out of the box. I could envision a scenario where somehow it keeps percolating. It keeps, puffing away, if I can use that cliche. What's happening?
Well, the good news is we just had a hearing just last week, and it got out of the first committee hearing, which was in the Senate Health, and it was with no votes. We even got bipartisan support. There's 2 Republicans that sit on the committee, so it was a 9-0 vote.
And so there were some abstainers, or
no abstainers, all a vote, yes votes.
So there were 6 Democrats, or 7. So there was only 2.
2 were, yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, so I was anticipating a lot of pushback, maybe even from the Republican Party. But what I'm sensing is the last time the state ever considered it was, several decades ago.
Right.
But I think what you're seeing over the period of time, whether it's federal government, other states, they understand the negative effects that cigarettes and tobacco has on individuals, that I think this is kind of the thing of what's expecting to come now.
Has any other state moved the age
No.
to 20? So again, California would be
California
a
would be
forerunner.
the first, yeah.
Okay, so you got out of health. Now what happens? Is big tobacco all of a sudden breathing down your throat? I would presume that getting out of health was a bit of a surprise, no?
Well, I mean, I wasn't surprised. I was, hopefully and optimistic.
Right.
The next one would be appropriations, which would be, the cost to it. Then it goes to the floor.
Let me ask you about the cost, because I presume there would be no direct cost, but there could be a hit to the state coffers because less cigarette tax.
Well, but we also technically are going to have another bill that's going to increase the cost of per pack, and if that passes, then there's going to be more money coming in. But if you look at the overall trend of money coming in on the sales tax for cigarette, it's declining because there's less and less people smoking anyway.
And could one argue that if fewer people are smoking, there'll be less of a hit on the state coffers because of healthcare costs? Fewer people.
Yes, definitely, because of the increased cost to our healthcare system.
So presumably, if it gets into a probes and there's no fiscal impact, it can be considered. Probes usually, if there's a fiscal impact, it can die there. Go into suspense. Get to the floor. What about your friends in the assembly?
I feel optimistic. I think if we have problems, it would be in because over in the assembly it would be in a different committee structure. It'd be called governance and governmental organization, which deals with the vices like cigarette, tobacco, alcohol, etc. It might have a little bit more of a trouble. I'm just going to have to work it a little bit harder. But going back to your question about cost, here's the thing: that it's not going to cost one single penny to the general fund, because right now we have, in effect, in the state of California, that to purchase cigarettes or even alcohol, you have to require an identification. Okay, you have to require license. You have to look and you have to check for it. So if you go to 21, even the licenses in the state of California have certain.
They already do.
They already do. So it's very easy and no cost.
What about the most important front? I presume the governor.
I don't know. I would think that I would hope that the governor would sign it for a couple of reasons. Number one, it would reduce the young individuals that are going to get addicted to tobacco, but also it's going to really reduce healthcare costs significantly in the long run, and the projected costs are going to be quite a bit.
So what's the timeline? When will we know?
Well, I mean, hopefully if we get it off the Senate floor and we don't have any trouble in the Assembly, I could, as early as possibly August or so, put on the governor's desk. And if that occurs, think about this. There are a few cities that have done it. And when the cities within those states that have done it, they have decreased. This could be the first state in the United States that can do it.
He's Ed Hernandez. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's California Edition.